Where do you find these magical investors? Well, it's important to remember they're not homogeneous. There's a bunch of different groups. I consider advice carefully. Somebody who raised money one way will tell you this is how you do it. That might be how it worked for them. There might be alternatives to that you should consider outside of how they did it though. Sources are typically, you can fund it yourself, you can use family and friends, you can network, people who you know, colleagues, you can meet people at events and whatnot. A good thing to consider is people who have an expertise in your space, because if you're really onto something novel, they will be able to recognize the value of that rather than just someone who sees, dozens of companies a week. Also, there are, unlike someone who's got an expertise in your space, there are people who are just strictly financial. I'm a rich retired dentist from Phoenix, and I hear there's a lot of money to be in .coms, so I'm here in Silicon Valley, and I'm an angel investor now. There are also people who are dedicated to solving your problem. One of my prospective clients does something in the education space. They received money from the Gates Foundation, which is not interested so much in the financial return as in solving the problems that they're solving. So consider all of these. Nice thing about investors is investors help you find others, because once they've funded you, they certainly don't want you running out of money, so they will hopefully attract a lot of their friends. If they don't know to do that, you can prompt them. Do you have any others who you think might find this company interesting? Also, very good to have your previous investors doubling down. Not only does that raise you money, but it's also a good signal to new investors. New investors want to see previous investors doubling down because they say, look, I just met you, these guys have known you for years. If they think this is worth betting on, that's a good sign. Conversely, how come you need all this new money and nobody who's already invested is investing, that's a red flag. There are disadvantages to all of these. So for example, if you're doing it yourself, I got these wrong. If you do it yourself, the risk is you can go bankrupt. The risk is if you're doing it with retirement funds, there are ways that you can invest your retirement fund in a company. It's a little circuitous, but you have to sort of start a self-funded IRA. The downside is you're spending your retirement, and remember, you're unlike an investor betting on one of 10 hits, you're betting on a one of one. Friends and family, the disadvantage there is it can affect your relationships if things go as unexpectedly. Networking, I especially want to emphasize if you're going to these events, it's sort of a popular thing. There's lots of people there, and usually only a handful of them are serious investors. There are a lot of people like me trying to get you to hire us. Do not waste your time talking to me at an event. Take my card and call me later. You want to, some of these, they kind of pack the room. Hey, we got a bunch of kids from a university in Ecuador to study startups. Lovely though they may be, do not waste your time talking to them. You want to find the money, find them fast. If you're working a crowd, if you're working an event, size these guys up, move on politely. Have things in your hand. Oh, I got to go throw this away. Pardon me for a minute. I got to go to the bathroom. I'm going to go grab a drink. Look at this. My croissant doesn't have butter. You want constant excuses to be churning the people you don't want to talk to. People with expertise in your space are great because they know the space, but they can also be opinionated. Well, like, I know this space, and that's not how you do it. So they can be on your case. That can backfire. People with strictly financial interest, of course, are going to be on your case. They don't care about solving the problem, or they don't think the technology is cool. That could go either way. I mean, the bad side is they might be on your case. The good side is they might actually force you to have a little discipline. Hey, look, you got to get this thing to market. Enough of you playing around. People who are dedicated to solving your problem can be advantageous because they're a little bit more of a high-minded goal, but they will leave if you have to pivot and your mission changes. Oh, you're not doing the education thing anymore? Well, it's up for us. Also, investors who help you find others, that's probably follow those on one of the previous. Previous investors doubling down, I already mentioned, that's an indicator to new investors. So it's important to note you want investors who have resilience, ones who are willing to re-up when the chips are down, and frankly, ones that have a bankroll that can invest in your next round if you hit your milestones.
Is that common, doubling down?
Yes, with a qualifier, it's usually for subsequent seed rounds. Typically, a lot of the seed rounds are like angels and friends and family, and usually once you switch to VCs usually aren't, the way it's done is they're investing so much money, they're like, we're not going to deal with negotiating a deal with these angels. So there's oftentimes sort of a switch when you switch from angels to VC that they sort of cease. But certainly once, I joke that, your Series A is 6 months away for a year and a half. So you'll find yourself coming back to the well for another angel round. During that period, yes, absolutely, it's common to have them doubling down. Likewise, a venture capitalist who invests in your B round might also invest in your C round and D round as well. So there's sort of a split there between angels and VCs, but within those two worlds, yes, doubling down is very common.
To that point, though, like some angels won't be able to make their way into the Series A, so they'll want to double down if they have a chance to before the Series A, so they can get a little bit more.
Yeah, that's actually a good example. It's like if you want to give them an incentive, investors an incentive to invest another seed round to give you a little bit more runway for your Series A, you go, hey, this is the last chance, man. We're on fire, and you're, after this, it's it for you. So if you want to stay, for one of my clients, I've created models that sort of show here's what you will invest if you don't want to be diluted in the next round. So it's kind of a nice, oh, well, I guess, it's handed to them, and they're like, I guess this is what I owe. Also, be careful from small investors asking for too much customized due diligence. A lot of retired dentists want to play mini venture capitalists. There is we talked about financial models. There is an expectation about stage versus detail. The earlier you are, it's more about the size of the market than how many people you're going to hire in year 3.5. And if you get a small investor who's, I'm good for 20 grand, I'm going to take up 6 weeks of your time doing due diligence, it's not worth it unless you can get some economies of scale. So beware of that. And by the way, that's also a red flag that they're not necessarily the best investor. They don't exactly know what they're doing if their expectations are out of alignment. And we've talked about get money wherever you can, which is oftentimes where it comes down to. But if you have the luxury of choosing your investors, oftentimes I'll tell people to take a lower valuation if it's with an investor who can get them more investors, or get them traction with customers, or get them relationships, or has more resilience. Don't assume that the best deal on paper is the best deal overall. I always say, investors are, it's a marriage, not a fling, so choose carefully. We also talked about, this is sort of building on that point, the savviest investors are oftentimes the one who drive the hardest terms, but they're actually more valuable for the advice and the network. So think carefully before rejecting anyone. They might even sort of be monetized. The reason I'm giving you a lousy valuation is a backwards way of saying I'm giving myself a deal for because of the premium I'm able to afford the company. Usually this is a bit of a luxury. You'll be lucky just to get as much money as you want.